Ah, yes, Pandora's box. Well, technically, it wasn't a box. It originally was a jar or a jug, at least as it's first presented, in a series of writings called Works and Days by the ancient Greek author Hesiod, one of the oldest after Homer. And most people know what Pandora's box means in the more modern sense. It's something that is open that leads to unmitigated ills. It has a runaway effect. It can't be stopped. And I think it's a very good description of what is afoot in the current year, what has been going on for several years now with a lot of momentum leading up to it. And that is the insanity around identity politics and the idea that athletic competition should be gender neutral, meaning that transgender people, above all transgender women, that is men who think they are women, can participate in female sports. And this is a bit of a niche, and I'm going to expand upon this, but the reality is that I was watching a brief documentary and I was reading some articles a while back and noticed that this is something that's actually happening that is demonstrably incorrect in its application, in the sense that these transgender women, men who believe they are women, competing against biological women, are just blowing away the competition. Now, formerly they were competing against other men and they were mediocre at best, sometimes okay, but the comparison simply can't be made. In terms of physiological and physical performance, men outstrip women across the board with virtually no exceptions. And so you have this situation of political acceptance, ratification of quote-unquote gender equality in sports in the form of this very niche group where there are actual demonstrable differences in outcome, and some people are upset. In this documentary I was watching, the female in question, a track star, a former high school track star, was exceptionally good for a female, but she simply cannot compete against the biological males. Now, were I a malicious person, I might make a statement akin to the pot calling the kettle black, or even more viciously, the pets attacking the masters. All of this is the result of a deluge of insanity and deep diving into this deluge of extraordinary identity politics, where each and every group needs some kind of representation above the call of duty. And it seems to be the overarching trend, the tendency, for these groups to be the lowest common denominator in terms of actual population. So how many transgender people are actually out there? It's not exactly clear to me, although I try to do some research. But I am safe in making the assumption, I believe, that they're an infinitesimally small fraction of the total population of human beings. And yet, you have legislation being passed, you have all these things that are meant to fix a problem that isn't really there. Or inasmuch as it's a problem, it's a personal problem that these individuals have. And facts are simply facts. There are profound physiological differences between biological males and females, not least of which in androgen production. The average adult male produces dozens and dozens of times the amount of testosterone compared to the average biological female, that is, the average biological male. This, among many other things, leads to many differences in outcome in athletic performance. Structurally, men are just better suited to everything. They're faster. The fact that women have that waist-to-hip ratio prevents them from being exceedingly fast. Men don't have that disadvantage. I could go on. It's pretty obvious. Transgender women are not actual women. They have advantages, even if they are stuffing themselves full of female sex hormones, such as estrogen or progesterone, take your pick. It doesn't change certain basic physiological differences. Bone density across the board. Women are weaker, they're slower, it just is the way it is. Now, it seems that you've reached a new zenith, if you will, of this insanity, because we're now at the stage where obvious differences in outcome don't matter. And at this stage, I might just say, I know there's an official ban in, say, the Olympics or athletic competition on making use of drugs such as steroids or growth hormone, but why not just allow it? Why not just let the person who best tolerates these drugs and can best make use of these drugs make use of them? Why not? It's their choice. Why can't you just choose to be a user of steroids or a user of hormones? Why can't you just respect that choice? Why can't they just be allowed to do that? You could create, perhaps akin to bodybuilding, the distinction between natural bodybuilding and normal bodybuilding, that is drug-infused bodybuilding, in the same sense by saying you'll have natural running competitions and drug-infused running competitions. Why not just go the full mile here? Since we're already delving into this ever-growing abyss of insanity. Now, I did say the pot calling the kettle black. A lot of the people who are perfectly accepting of every step up until this current one, they are now at odds with themselves because the whole time they're supporting this insanity. Let's look a while back at Brett Weinstein in Evergreen College. This guy is an insane progressive, exceptionally progressive. And he didn't realize that people with his mindset were essentially priming people of younger generations to take on these ideas. Now, and a lot of people, again, poo-poo and criticize Jordan Peterson for various things, and I've done it too. The sovereign of the individual. It's a bit grandiose, sure, but there's something to be said for it. When everyone falls into the trap of never-ending identity politics, the divisions that can arise from that are possibly infinite. At this stage, it might not even be possible to come up with the number of different groups of people who will be competing with each other for public resources, athletic resources, take your pick, that think they are different and therefore need to be treated exceptionally and therefore differently from other people. What did people think was going to happen? This is Pandora's box. It is, or the jug, as I mentioned in the beginning. It's letting loose the lid and everything has escaped as a consequence. I'm not for punishing people or persecuting people by any stretch of the imagination. But granting the most fringe minority groups of society not just basic human dignity and rights, but exceptional rights, the ability to participate in athletic competition, which they will surely win, is akin, basically, to cheating. That's what it is. It's like saying Ben Johnson actually won the 1988 sprinting competition against Carl Lewis because, well, he did take drugs, but he wasn't cheating. Now, there's a lot of controversy behind that because it's safe to assume that most Olympic athletes are taking some kind of drug, Carl Lewis included, likely. But nonetheless, it's like saying, you know what, if you want to use drugs and you choose to identify as a steroid and growth hormone user, you can do so and still compete. It's okay. That's the equivalent because the advantage there is perhaps not as profound, but it is significantly greater for men because that's the difference in male athletic performance and female athletic performance. I think Colte made several videos about this as well, comparing the best female tennis players against the kind of most mediocre tennis players in the male competition, and they get crushed. This is not rocket science. You don't need to know all the details of the androgens and the hormones and the bone structure and the morphology. It just is the way it is. And the really interesting question that opens up from this is, at what point in time will it stop? Because now the people that have supported the insanity of identity politics and the paranoia that's surrounding it are beginning to become very fearful. Because what's happened is the original identity politics groups, which typically were political and ethnic, are giving way to new types of identity politics groups, which are overshadowing the older ones, and the older ones are getting worried. This is ultimately, I think, the folly of engaging in extreme identity politics, because there's never enough of the pie to go around. It's never enough for these people. And because of the possibilities, once you open up Pandora's box, they are near infinite. I'm not going to pretend to know what new group might emerge that will claim to have special rights or take your pick. Will it be young men who believe they're actual trucks making truck sounds? Or will it be something even wackier than that? I simply don't know at this stage. But if ever there were a more demonstrable example of how toxic, for lack of a better word, and how fucked up things are, you can see it in the very clear-cut example of quote-unquote transgender women competing against biological women, and the biological women simply cannot compete. Now, I would have no problem creating a transgender division. That would seem much more reasonable. But that seems unlikely at this stage because that would other people, right? The whole point of this is that all this identity politics garbage is othering people on a constant basis. Jordan Peterson isn't wrong about everything, because if you play the identity politics game too long, you will end up where we currently are. It just seems to be a clear and obvious destination. Problem, of course, which I have cited, is that when everyone else is playing identity politics and you're not, that can become a problem because no one wants to look at things from an individual perspective anymore. Certainly not here. But what can I say? This is the end product of people who for decades obsessed about quote-unquote identity politics, minority rights, all these things to somehow make these people different, exceptional from everybody else. And you can say they succeeded. This is the biggest success thus far because you actually have biological men competing against biological women being called women. I mean, what greater sign of success could you have? And of course, there is a dark sense of humor in all of this because in these very disparate circles of identity politics and people obsessed with them, you have feminists getting upset about that are not real women, not just with regards to athletic performance, but transgender women can't understand real women's experiences. There are tons of divisions. And I do think there's actually a light at the end of the tunnel here, potentially. The fractiousness that we've seen in the left is only going to get worse with time. I'm reasonably confident in that prediction. And I only say that because we can see it happening before our eyes, and it seems to be getting worse. That each and every group wants special cookies and special kudos and special recognition, and they're all fighting each other for a piece of the pie. And now women, the most privileged demographic of all, are getting some of the backlash from this, and they're getting upset too. Wait, you mean I have to compete against actual biological men? Well, that's not fair. And the parents are getting upset. But where's Zen? And they're afraid of the political backlash. They're afraid that they'll be socially and culturally and politically ostracized. And for good reason. We know what these people do. So all I can say, apart from the silver lining, that there's so much fractiousness in these various factions that maybe some sort of cohesive, coherent counter-movement to the insanity we see on display would be more likely to succeed, if only because it would be more organized and not obsessed with identity politics. But I could have told you so. But what else do you expect? What else do these people expect? There's not much else to say about this topic now, is there? It's just that it's so obvious where this was going, and it's going there right now, and it's going even further. It's interesting to say the least, but none of it is very surprising. Anyway, gentlemen, if I'm still alive and feeling sufficiently hale, I will catch you later. As always, may the gods watch over you. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.